Lolberts, that's our word, brought to you by being a contrarian about contrarianism. And I'm your host, Jim Cheeses, and I am not with anybody today. Today is going to be a solo episode, as you probably could tell by the picture and the title of this episode. Now, normally what I do on every multiple of 25 episodes, I do a solo episode where I go and I start debunking things, silly things that libertarians believe. I did the JFK assassination and GMOs. And this last episode, I did Freemasonry and the Denver airport conspiracies. I felt it was probably a better idea to bring on a guest who really knew what the hell he was talking about with Freemasonry. And thankfully I did. Thank goodness I did, because he really kind of he gave me a lot of information that I don't know if I could have pulled it up myself or I had the wherewithal to pull it up myself. A lot of great stuff. So thank you, Larry, for coming on. But I also had people who were kind of like, oh, it's not a solo episode. And, and I wasn't really talking much in it. A lot of the time it was just me asking questions, getting answers, and then going, okay, and then moving on to the next subject. And my commentary was very limited, if at all, on most of the stuff. So there were some people who contacted me and was like, oh, man, solo episode. And also I've been getting some comments from people who used to follow me on YouTube when I used to do a lot of just straight YouTube content, that they missed me just talking by myself, and they're not too interested in the podcast because I have guests on. They much rather hear me just ramble on for whatever reason. Apparently they just like me. So I'm giving you what you want. I'm really genuinely considering doing another side podcast, much like how there's Seeds of Liberty, and then there's also Abolitionist Abstractions, which is like a separate podcast, but it's still in the main feed of the Seeds of Liberty podcast, which is a great podcast. Go check them out. I'll put a link in the description if I can remember. In fact, I'll remember. Let's see, put Seeds link. Put that in there, and I'm not typing on my my mechanical keyboard, so you won't hear it. So I'm thinking about doing something like that, where it's just a solo type thing. It's something I'm genuinely considering. I'm still kind of thinking about how I could do it, how I could pull off a format, or if I just should include going back to the YouTube video style and then including an audio version for the podcast. I don't know yet. Still thinking about it. Open to questions. Also, Steve Miller had sent me a couple of aprons for me to give out. One I bought. He gave me the other. So I have 2 aprons to give out. So there is a contest coming soon. As soon as I can think of a good idea for a contest. As soon as I'll let you know when that happens. No Amazon stuff again today. We're going to have a really long conversation about Amazon purchases the next episode. So I don't know. Maybe if there's time left over, I'll pull it up and we'll talk about it. We'll see. Again, this is not going to be an edited podcast. I'm not going to do any multiple takes. I already did one take just because I flubbed the intro joke, which, by the way, was a stolen joke anyway. So thanks for that. So what the real main reason why I'm doing this, at least this topic, I've already explained why I'm doing a solo episode, but the main reason why I'm doing this topic is because in the future, very near future, I plan on starting an interview show, which will be in the feed of the Lolberts feed as well. It'll be its own separate show, but it'll be just an interview show. It's going to have its own style, and I'll make a separate feed for that as well if people just want those. But for the most part, it'll still be included with your free Lolberts subscription. It'll still be there. And I wanted to kind of talk to a lot of people and kind of spur a lot of kind of debate, not really so much debate, but just a discussion about some of the things that I disagree with libertarians on. Like a lot of libertarians. In fact, most libertarians I bump into, there are major points of contention that I have. Normally not with the outcome, and we'll talk about the specifics. And it's really important that you're not just getting kind of like, when I say I disagree with this, that you automatically assume that I'm in the inverse position for that. Because I will be talking about the non-aggression principle. And anytime you say well, I don't agree with the non-aggression principle, the immediate assumption a lot of people will make is that, well, then you must agree with using force to achieve your political ends, which I don't. It's just I just have some problems with the principle itself, but the end goal I pretty much agree with people on that. So it's very important that you pay attention to a lot of the things that I'm saying, because there's very important details that you may be missing, and you're going to infer that I have positions that I don't. So again, let me just say for the record that I am what you would call an anarcho-capitalist. I'm not a big fan of the term capitalism, and we'll get into that because that's one of the point of contentions that I have. But just for the sake of just being able to explain to people what I am off the bat, it's a very useful term because a lot of people immediately know what it is and they understand the type of capitalism. Unless you're like one of these people who are just like a far left troll, you really probably will understand what I'm talking about here. All right, but so before we get into any of this, I want to talk about contrarianism. This is a term that constantly gets thrown at me, and from what I understand, the term contrarian means someone who just takes a contrarian position. That's again the tautology. I'm defining something by defining it. A contrary opinion of whatever group they're a part of, or a position that's in odds with what the group is normally known for advocating. For example, let's say if someone was on the socialist side of the spectrum, they may, just by them saying something like, no, I agree that the type of capitalism libertarians want is radically different than what we have. And gets upset when socialists try to say that what we have now is the libertarian paradise, and a lot of people will get upset in those kind of circles because that little difference is so problematic for them. But there are people who go out of their way to try to find positions that don't really fit into kind of the group that they normally associate with, just to be like an outlier, just to kind of troll, or just to kind of spur debate, or just to try to make themselves look cool because look at me, like I'm so much different. And there is some value in that. There is some value in people having positions that kind of run the gamut in any kind of group, even if they have this very similar goals. It's kind of important to have this, because at the end of the day, it's important to have these kinds of discussions. Is the NAP really a valid axiomatic ethical prescription, or is it just a rule of thumb? And the debate needs to happen, because if we're all just going to sit around circle jerking and never talking about this, we're going to be ill-equipped when someone actually does have a decent refutation of the non-aggression principle. And if we're basing our entire society off something that's so flimsy, and we didn't realize how flimsy it was because we never talked about it, then it's important to kind of to hash this out now internally, rather than wait for a society to be built on it and have it exploited, or having someone who may entirely take down an entire tradition just because of this one basic kind of philosophy. So contrarians are kind of useful. I do not consider myself a contrarian, and as the joke stated before that I stole from someone who didn't want to be named, not Cantwell, but apparently I am a contrarian about being called a contrarian. So there are a lot of positions that I don't hold that many libertarians hold, and I don't hold them because I find them to be like provocative, or like I want to be different, or I'm trying to be that special snowflake or whatever. I would much rather, it would be a lot easier for me to just agree with all of these positions that most libertarians have, and then not have to deal with any kind of conflict amongst my peers, or have to, just have a conversation with friends that share the similar perspectives, libertarianism, that is, and then automatically get thrown into like this very deep philosophical debate when I'm just trying to enjoy a pizza and a beer at Aces and Ales. By the way, Aces and Ales every third Monday. I have to plug it. Liberty on the Rocks. Come check us out. Was it 6:30 p.m.? 6:30 p.m. every third Monday. Aces and Nails, Tenea, not Nellis. So anyways, it would make my life a whole lot easier if I just agreed with every libertarian that I came across instead of having a deep philosophical debate. The reason why I end up holding these positions is not because I'm trying to be contrarian or be a contrarian about being contrarian. The reason why I end up coming to these conclusions is because I'm always trying to test my ideas and trying to see. Anytime I'm interested in something, I'm always interested in the critiques of something, especially stuff that I'm interested in. So when I got interested in libertarianism, I didn't do that as much. But I was kind of bouncing it off my liberal perspective, which I had at the time. And then I was trying to bounce it off of that. And then it just seemed to make more and more and more sense. But I never kind of considered other types of arguments that are around that. So I'm very much interested in conservative criticisms of libertarians, of anarcho-communist perspectives of libertarianisms, and Marxist perspectives of it, and getting an idea of what all of their criticisms are, and then trying to find truth in it, and trying to find whether or not these ideas are correct, or whether or not these ideas fall flat. And there's kind of some that I've either I don't really know if I've completely changed position on it, because even the stereotypical libertarian anarcho-capitalist, I still agree with them on virtually everything. It's a lot of the time it's some of the terminology or some of the axioms that they're using in order to explain things that I have major disagreements with. So yeah, again, I'm not trying to be a jerk here. This is just what I feel. But anyways, yeah. So I'm doing this mostly getting into some of the things that I disagree with, and I have a list in front of me, and they span the gamut of very contentious to, oh yeah, I can see where you're coming from, Jim, but I don't know if I agree. That kind of level of discourse to people sending me hate mail and possibly even death threats. But so. But I want this out there, and this is and I want this out there so that way when I do have this interview show and I get guests on, I can always refer to them to this so they can get an understanding of where I am philosophically, where I am in terms of my political thought and everything, so that they can get an idea of like what to talk about once they kind of get on and we can hash out different ideas. Maybe to your advantage, because there's nothing great than seeing a fight, as I've learned with my podcast with MK Lords. Fight podcasts sell, even if they're free. All right, so I'm going to start off with some of the more least contentious ones first. Let's see. Let's go for MRAs and feminism. So there is a tendency in libertarianism to reject feminism and immediately hop onto the men's rights movement train. And I fell into this trap a while ago. And it mostly had to do with a lot of the things that were happening around the time of it was Atheism Plus. That's when I first started noticing this kind of wave of just insane political correctness and this social justice activism that has just been like a pure cancer. And attached to this activity is this ideology called feminism, right? Now, I've been familiar with feminism, being liberal, But I was much more interested in the kind of more mainstream milquetoast version of it, where, you know, the most extreme example would be like the pay gap. But for the most part, it was just like, don't be a dick when you're at work. Treat women with respect when, you know, and not try to like hit on them when they're at work. Okay, they're just trying to get their job done and collect a paycheck and go home, and not deal with dudes at the office trying to get in their pants all the time. And the perspective that I had on it was, I worked with very gross and very unattractive women, and it would be much of a bother for me to come to work every day and see those women and just know that as soon as I walk in those doors, they're going to be trying to like slap my butt or say, "Hey baby, what's up? Like, what do you want to do afterwards? Like, ooh, I could lick you." And just, that would really kind of gross me out. I actually work in a facility where I deal with people who have dementia. All right. And it's not uncommon for a lot of the older women, being confused and all, for them to make very uncomfortable advances at me, and it's kind of bizarre, and it's very uncomfortable. And I just try to like think of in terms of that when I interact with women in a position where they don't really have too much of an option to just completely not talk to you, because my coworkers are going to end up needing to talk to me. They're going to need help doing something, or they need to pass work on to me that, you know, that belongs to me or whatever. And I always kind of feel like, you know, the workplace is kind of off limits, completely off limits. I've had one exception, but that was a very notable exception with some very important differences. And I wasn't me initiating this kind of relationship that I had. But that's an extreme outlier, and I don't expect something like that to be happening anytime sooner. And I always kind of took that approach. So that was always kind of like my kind of view of feminism when I was a part of it. Now, when the social justice warrior activism came on, like, I had a complete like reactionary response to it. And my reactionary response was to get on board with the men's rights movement, because a lot of the things that they advocate for make a whole lot of sense. The criminal justice system is definitely biased towards women. Advertising, it seems as though that kind of trend is kind of left, but it's still kind of there in like certain sitcom style television shows where men are stupid and they can't do anything by themselves. You know, that's why they need a woman to make sure that they can manage to cook an egg. In fact, there was a campaign for a while that Carl's Jr. used to do, where it was basically like, without us, some guys would starve, and that was really kind of tacky for a while. And I was always thinking, like, what if they had like, like a commercial for something, and they insulted women by saying like, I don't know, like a Hoover vacuum. I think the one example that I heard from, was it Tom Likas, was like, can you imagine if they had like a Hoover vacuum commercial and it says like, if only your girlfriend could suck like this or something. People would be up in arms. But apparently there was a big pushback against that, and Carl's Jr. ended up firing their ad company at the time over this, because there was such a big amount of pushback, and a lot of advertisers have dumped this idea that, you know, you need to insult men in order to advertise to them, because, you know, Carl's Jr. is basically mostly that's a guy restaurant for the most part. Anyways, so, you know, that always kind of bothered me at the same time. So anyways, so I kind of got on board with the MRA type stuff, and then I immediately noticed the major problems with these people. A lot of the people in the men's rights movement, MGTOW movement as well, a lot of these people are extremely toxic people. And I remember the moment that it really occurred to me. It almost took like a couple of weeks when I started like looking at like criticisms of feminisms from the MRA perspective, and I ended up posting this picture on Facebook, or this video on Facebook rather, and it was good. Like, I remember watching it and I was like, oh, this is good. And I got like halfway through the video and I was like, this is probably worth sharing. And so I shared the video before I finished watching it as it was still playing. And then it went from like, look at all these women hitting guys. Isn't it terrible that it's socially acceptable for women to hit guys? And I was like, yeah, that is bad. And then it went into immediately advocating for if a girl hits you, punch her back. And I was like, whoa, what am I associating myself with? And the more I kind of looked into it, the more I kind of became, like, all right, screw this movement. But I do find some value in some of the MRA stuff. And I always tell people, like, it's kind of the Arini argument, I guess, is that I'm a MGTOW on paper. But I definitely don't want to associate with any of those fucking lunatics, for sure. In the MGTOW movement, I've been voluntarily single for quite some time, and I'm enjoying it, and I don't really see myself getting myself into a committed relationship. Right? I like having friends. I like having like strangers and all that sort of stuff. I much prefer that. I don't have to deal with things like Christmas and Valentine's Day and meeting the folks and nagging and all this stuff. I just don't have to deal with it. They don't have to deal with my crap. It's perfect. We're both happy at the end of the day. But I just don't like the movement. I don't think it needs to be a movement. Much like I don't want to have kids, but I don't see myself joining like the child-free movement and trying to encourage people to stop having so many gosh darn kids. Like, it doesn't matter to me. If you want to have kids, that's great. I don't want them because they're sticky and they ask too many questions. Man, the Greens, I wish the Greens would come back. I really do. I miss them. So yeah, there's some things that I agree with feminism, for sure. I would definitely not call myself a feminist. I have lots of problems with the overall ideology, especially with the concept of intersectionality and I disagreed with what I thought intersectionality was until it was explained to me, and I was like, oh, well, that's even worse. I'm not a big fan of putting people into groups and then judging them judging them based on what kind of groups they associate with, either voluntary or involuntary. I like to judge people based on the individual themselves and not part of any kind of group. And I noticed that a lot of libertarians kind of fall into the MRA camp or the extreme anti-feminism camp. I am neither, and I'm not trying to take I'm not trying to appeal to the middle road here. I'm really not. I'm not trying to be a contrarian. I just see a lot of problems with both, and I'd much rather deal with the issues individually when they come across. So yeah, the wage gap thing, absolute nonsense. But there is a lot to say about how men treat women in various social functions. And I've talked about this in depth with MK before. So if you really want to listen to it, because I think we actually did it on the last podcast, which was 74. The intergender debate championship. After I yelled at her for her article, we ended up talking about a lot of things we agreed with. And also she did an Iconoclast episode with us, and I think we may have talked about it. It's been a while since that happened, and I tend not to listen to a lot of podcasts that I appear in, even though I really try, and when I do, I end up liking it. But I think we did talk about that. So I'll put a link to that as well. Iconosass. All right. So yeah, that pretty much sums up. I mean, that's probably one of the least contentious thing. And I'm trying to put all of these in a hierarchy. And we all know, if you listen to my Patreon content, how bad I am with putting topics in a hierarchy, especially after last night. I'm trying to put them in somewhat of a hierarchy in terms of what I find to be like the least contentious to the most contentious. So we got the MRA stuff out of the way. Yeah, so let's go with Epicureanism. because a lot of libertarians are really on the they're really on the Stoic train, and I'm not really interested in Stoicism. I know one of my co-hosts, Nick Hazelton, is really into Stoicism, which is fine. I'm not completely against Stoicism. I just don't find it particularly valid for me. I've been much more on the Epicurean train. I got familiar with this through a guy named Brian Sovereign, who by the way is absolutely terrible. Don't go listen to his show, Sovereign Tech. I think he's actually like a sovereign citizen guy. I'm kidding. It's actually a great show. Go check him out. But he did this. He's talked about like hedonism and Epicureanism like here and there, but never really in depth until I heard him and Nick. It wasn't really a debate so much as it was an exposition, I don't know, of what they kind of believed, and they kind of had a really interesting discussion about it. And I was like, hedonism makes a whole lot more sense. And I was always under the false impression that hedonism is where it's like, the fat guy laying on the winter bed and getting fed, grapes by nude women, half nude women in togas. And just, eating like giant legs of turkey and laughing at all the peasants as they're rolling around in poverty. That's what have always been my opinion. It's basically the Futurama guy, the hedonism bot from Futurama. That's kind of the perspective I had of hedonism, which is what most libertarians view as hedonism. But it's not really until you kind of look into what hedonism is that you kind of go like, oh, well, that makes sense. It's kind of like when a socialist first kind of comes in contact with Rand, how they go like, selfishness, that sounds terrible. I don't even want to entertain such an idea. How could people be interested in selfishness? But then when you understand the kind of concept of selfishness or her definition of selfishness, that you start going like, oh, okay, that makes a whole lot more sense. So there's things in Stoicism that I find valuable, but I think there's the stuff that I find valuable in Epicureanism is something that I find much more valuable and has some odds with it. And Epicureanism, I think, is far more valuable to people, and that is basically the pursuit of pleasure. Now, I asked, or basically like how to improve your life, or how to live ethically, or depending on what kind of hedonism you're talking about, ethical hedonism or whatever, is basically the idea that you want to achieve the most amount of pleasure in your life as possible. Now, again, I asked Michael Malice, he did a live stream the other day, and I asked him because I was just kind of curious, because I know that he used to put like little devil horns in his hair and whatever. And I was like, Epicureanism or Stoicism? And he was like, wow, that is a great question. And he said something that was like, oh, this explains everything perfectly. He said that people view hedonism with crack orgies. But it should be more associated with something like Martha Stewart, because Martha Stewart, what does she want? What does she do for pleasure? Well, she makes sandwiches and she talks to her friends and she keeps her house clean, and that's what makes her happy. That's what brings her pleasure. And I was like, that's fucking perfect. I don't think I could have said that any better myself. So thank you for that, Michael Malice, because I know he gets really upset if you steal his ideas because of my IP. Anyways, he summed it up pretty well, and I thought that was absolutely perfect. And if you think about it in terms of, well, what would make you more happy is to treat everyone like crap for your benefit by defrauding people and then turning people off to you, then that wouldn't make you very happy in the long run. It would work out in the short run, but after a while, things would start catching up to you really quickly. You would either get apprehended by law enforcement agencies, you would be shunned by people you love and care for. You would be known as disreputable. People wouldn't want to do business with you, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it would be very hard to function and to keep up that lifestyle. It just wouldn't work. But if you're genuinely kind to people, and if you're kind to people because it brings you value in the long term, and that brings you pleasure in the long term, then it's all going to work out long term. You know, like as much as people accuse me of being a sociopath, I guess I'm not a sociopath. No, I'm just kidding. As much as people kind of confuse me being like socially awkward, and you know, like I'm my level of empathy is below average. It's not gone. I end up not kind of caring about a lot of things. And it's probably because like there was a time in my life where a lot of things were happening, bad things were happening with friends and whatever in rapid succession. It really kind of cut my ability to kind of empathize with people. And it's also been kind of dampering. Anytime I had a girlfriend after this happened as well, it was really hard for me to have like really strong feelings. And that was probably one of the reasons why I kind of gave up exclusive relationships. But you know, even still, it still brings me a certain level of joy to make sure that people that I care about and people who are in my life are happy and happy with me. And I like to do things for them. And in the end, it's nice because I can always count on them, you know, when things suck for me, to kind of always reach out. Like I was just recently in a car accident, and it felt really good when a lot of people reached out and said, "Oh my goodness, I'm glad to hear that you're okay, Jim. Thank you. That really means a lot." Like it really does mean a lot. And I know that I would not get that response hadn't I also reached out when either, you know, they had questions or they just wanted someone to talk to, or maybe they had problems themselves. And I was really kind of, you know, extending my empathy as far as it could go, because I knew that in the end, like it was of value. So that's kind of where I stand on Epicureanism. I find that much more valuable than Stoicism, especially the idea where you're just always assuming the worst. I really don't find that to be very valuable. Where you're just constantly like, "Oh, I have a lump, that must be cancer." I just don't like that kind of like. I'm a bit of a pessimist, I'll admit it, but that's too much. That's just way too much. That's just way too much on the pessimism side for me. So we're glad we got that one out of the way. I can't believe I have like two similar topics, but those are definitely going to save to the end because that's going to be really bad. Let's talk about segregation. Now, you're going to immediately think like, whoa, you disagree with libertarians on segregation? Wait, hold on a second. I'm not going far left and I'm not going far right. I think there's a good balance that I'm working out here. And again, I'm not appealing to the middle ground. A lot of things in the middle ground are just terrible. They're even worse than the polar opposites of that. So there's been a lot of talk about segregation, especially with the kind of quote unquote rise of the alt-right. I wouldn't even call it that. They're basically just the media's whipping boy. And that's the only reason why they get any press. They're a fringe group within a fringe group, right? I mean, they're more fringe than most fringe groups, and no one takes them seriously, and that's why I haven't been talking about it recently. And even next time I have Matt on, chances of that coming back up, none, because you can count them on your fingers. There's none of them there. Anyways, that's besides the point. But you know, there is some really interesting kind of conversations around some of the things that they brought up, even in circles of people who I would normally agree with on stuff like this, that I completely disagree. For me personally, do I find it ethical? Well, no, I'm not really interested in like morals anyway. All right. I'm not really interested in moralizing, and saying like, this is objectively moral to, you know, or immoral to exclude people based on the color of their skin. I'm not going to go that far. I find it distasteful. It's not very preferable to me. I like not everybody looking the same. It's just whatever. But there is a part of me, and it's unfortunate, it's unnatural, and you can try to fight it all you want, but there is a tendency that if you are in a group where people are not what you would consider peers, and there's a list of things that people use, like different qualifiers, and people, it's just subconscious that people have been, it's kind of bred into biology, that, you know, you start kind of having reduced trust levels when you're in particular situations. So like if I'm hanging out with a bunch of white guys at a libertarian group, then, you know, like they're all males, they're usually all white, we all have the same kind of idea, we're all alcohol drinkers. These are like things that, you know, we all have some sort of bonding thing, right? This is some sort of like whatever. Now if I go to an R&B show, that's going to be a completely different situation, because I'm not going to. Chances are most of the people there are not going to be white. The chances are they're not going to be males. The chances are they're not going to be. It's not going to be over music that I'm interested in, and a lot of times they're probably doing things that I'm not particularly fond of, like drinking certain types of alcohols that I don't like, or doing drugs that I don't particularly like, which I'm not passing any judgment on. I'm just saying, like, all of these factors, I'm not going to see things in common where I would consider people to be peers. That said, I still do want to live in a kind of an ethnically diverse area, and I do enjoy having friends of all different kind of whatever, but at the same time, I can see why some people have a stronger preference for this than I do, even though my preference is very, 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 very mild, to be with quote unquote peers. So that being said, like I'm not passing judgment either way. I will say that it is concerning, I guess would be the word, that, you know, people would, you know, like see something on the news, right? And then immediately go like, I bet Jews were behind this. It's like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, this dude's insane. Get this guy the fuck away from me. Or if, you know, if I'm hanging out with someone and they seem like a really cool guy, and then there's something on the news where like, oh, you know, like we had a robbery on whatever street and here are the suspects, and, you know, they're African American, and they're like, you know what? I'm telling you, we never should have got rid of slavery or segregation or whatever. Then it's like, whoa, all right, that's not the kind of person that I want to hang out with. It's really not. However, this is where I disagree with a lot of libertarians. I don't really give a shit if someone wants to start a township in a theoretical anarchist society where they don't want to allow people of a certain race. I don't want to live there. I'm not interested in living there. Chances are I'm not going to like anybody who does live there. Probably not. But I have no moral qualms with it. Also because, and we'll get into the moral thing in just a bit, I don't really accept morality, quote unquote, as an actual thing. But if someone wants to go off and do that thing, hey, if and I'm going to put it in case if you're getting upset by this, let me explain it to you. If a bunch of racists wants to get out of society and go live somewhere else, why would you want to stop them? Why would you insist that they that they live in a more quote unquote enlightened world, right? I don't know why people are so insistent on forcing racist people to interact with people that they don't like, especially if they want to get up and leave. If they're one of these people who want to start like there was an interesting documentary that I saw because Michael W. Dean had told me to watch it because we were going to talk about it, and it was actually good. And it was basically like a bunch of Nazis, like actual Nazis, swastika wearing and everything, decided that they were going to move to this town, and I don't remember. It's probably in one of the Dakotas or one of the flyover states in the north. They decided that they were going to move to this town where there was only one black person that lived in this whole entire town, and they were going to kind of create an all-white society, and they were going to drive this one black guy out, and it caused a big stink. And Yeah, that whole thing about like them going in and disrupting the town meetings and fucking with this poor guy just because he was black. Yeah, that was all bad. But if they were to find some place in the middle of nowhere where no one lives and build their own little town and say like, we don't want black people here, I don't have any problem with that. In fact, I'd much rather you go and build that perfect who-wat society so that I don't have to fucking deal with you anymore, and I don't have to hear about you complaining on the fucking internet anymore that the Jews are taking over. Just go away. Just take your stuff and go away. So yeah, I have no problem with that, and I think a lot of libertarians like would get upset when they hear that, and they also would probably, and the other side would probably get upset as well. I don't think I have any friends here. I really don't think I have any friends here. It's usually you have to be like, it's wrong for anybody to exclude people based on the races, and you must fight against it at all costs. Or you're a cuck for wanting to hang out with darkies. There's no middle ground in libertarianism anymore, and it's kind of annoying. And I think deep down inside, a lot of people would agree with what my positions. They just seem not to talk about it, and the people who do want to talk about it are usually the extremes of either side. So that's why I'm putting it a little bit down on my list for comparison. So you can kind of tell, like maybe this is a sign of things to come. So yeah, I guess I should talk about capitalism next, because I think that one's pretty easy compared to some of the ones that are coming up next. Some of these are really fucking contentious, especially this last one. And I'm looking at it like, yeah, I'm getting hate mail for this one. So let's talk about capitalism. I am not a fan of the term capitalism, and I have not been a fan of the word capitalism for quite some time. Once I started figuring out what capitalism means, where the term came from, and how it is used today. And I think that when we're talking about language, it's important to kind of take into account how people are using the word today it properly, and I don't consider literally Hitler to be right unless you're literally talking about Hitler. Literally talking about Hitler, not Richard Spencer. He's literally not Hitler. You get what I'm saying. But anyways, the term capitalism was it wasn't exactly thought up by Marx. It wasn't coined by Marx, but it sort of was. It was actually coined by the people who were translating his work over into English. And he had a very specific definition of capitalism when he was criticizing capitalism. He was not criticizing laissez-faire kind of free markets in terms of capitalism. What he was talking about was the status quo at the time, which is not too different than statist capitalism that we have today, and that is where there's basically kind of like levels of liberalism in the marketplace, but at the same time there are still elements of corporatism, fascism, and the state kind of working in the interests of certain interests of certain capitalists, and creating regulatory hurdles in that place, and getting a pass on very exploitative labor, especially at the time, because at the time there was some pretty nasty things going on. But hey, what was going on before that was far, far worse, and so that was considered an upgrade. But once material conditions come to be so well, then that's when people have moral outrages. People had no problem with child labor up until like the 1800s, when we actually had the material means to be okay with, or to have the material means for children not to starve in the street and also not work. That's when it started being like, well, we can't allow children to work in these factories. Well, why not? They have been working there. They've been working in the fields their entire life, and it's much safer for them to work in a factory than it is for them to work subsistence farming, or prostituting, for even worse. But anyways, I'm getting off topic. So the term capitalism, he was talking about a specific type of economic system that was very prevalent in his day. And sure, you could extend those. He probably would extend some of those criticisms over to more kind of liberalized markets. But for the most part, his criticism of capitalism, Das Kapital, was a criticism of what we would consider to be capitalism today. Now, of course, he got some predictions very, very fucking wrong, both in terms of capitalism and communism. He got some very, very problematic ones done. But it's hard to talk to people about capitalism and expect them to be on board when the term capitalism is inherently a word that was designed to be a pejorative against a specific ideology that has really terrible flaws with it. That I think libertarians would agree that the current state of quote unquote capitalism, or even capitalism back in the 1800s, there were some major fucking problems with it. And when people say like, well, I'm a capitalist, I think that's giving. And they're not talking about like what we have now. What they're talking about is, a theoretical free market. That's a big problem, because now you're ended up having to defend what we have now instead of what you want. And what you want is very different from what we have now. Otherwise, you wouldn't be fighting for it if you already have it, right? You'd be just fighting to preserve it. So I tried not to use the term capitalism, especially when I'm talking to people who are socialists or on the left, mostly because when you talk to them, they're going to immediately assume that you're talking about what we have today. And then the argument's going to turn into that. In fact, every time I've seen a debate between a capitalist and a quote unquote capitalist and a Marxist or a communist, the first thing that they always going to want to do is try to define terms. And the first term they try to define is capitalism. And it's usually by a definition that the person who is usually on the capitalist side to just go like, well, I don't accept that definition. Why not just accept the definition? Because that is the definition. And then just say like, okay, well, let's just use the more accurate term for what we're talking about, since capitalism is basically an umbrella term for a lot of different things, which may not even include free markets. And just say like, okay, well, I don't advocate that. I advocate for a laissez-faire market, or I advocate for a liberalized market. Now you're putting them at a disadvantage, because now you can actually argue the ideas and not have to argue against this thing that Marx was arguing against in Das Kapital, which you don't support. I think that's kind of important. So that's why I kind of tried not to use the quote unquote capitalist label. But if someone wants to know what I am, and I have a feeling that they kind of understand, political thought a little bit, and I know that if I say like, well, I'm an ANCAP, that would give them enough information of where I would stand, in 2 words. If they want me to elaborate, I can elaborate a whole lot more, which I am going to be doing here. But for the most part, how did I talk about that topic yet? What am I marking it? I think it's kind of important to kind of stay away from that term, especially if it's just going to be used against me. All right. Yeah, sorry. I know how much you guys like to complain about my nicotine breaks, but I'm able to pause it now. So anyways, so moving along. Speaking of capitalism, let's talk about Austrian economics. I am not an Austrian. When I first got into libertarianism, I was more interested into the Chicago school of thought, and that's because I was a mini-statist, and that was kind of more of appealing at the time. Because like Milton Friedman was one of the more known people. Remember, this was before Ron Paul. Well, Ron Paul was in Congress, and I knew who he was, but and I know that he given some interesting speeches here and there that were available on YouTube. But for the most part, he was virtually a nobody to most people, except for people who are really in the know in libertarianism, who are in the academic kind of people who read a lot of Mises and stuff, which was not a lot of people. Even a lot of libertarians were like, academic stuff's too much. Excuse me. So I was more interested in that for a while, and then I ended up getting a hold of the Libertarian Manifesto, aka, or actually it's For New Liberty, aka the Libertarian Manifesto. And I thought just by the title, the Libertarian Manifesto, that this guy, whoever this guy is, Rothbard, whatever. That's what I thought at the time. I don't know who this guy is, but he definitely wrote the manifesto on libertarianism. Apparently, this is going to be a manifesto for a smaller, restrained government. And I used to think people like Ian on Free Talk Live was a complete fucking moron for thinking, anarchism, was a good idea. Like that's a terrible idea. What the fuck is wrong with you? But I started reading this book, and the way kind of Rothbard writes it, you don't really. It's kind of alluded to at first, but you kind of forget it. You're just like, oh, okay, whatever. And then you start kind of going through the chapters, and you're like, okay, I agree with that. Being a mini statist, you'd be like, I agree with this, I agree with that, I agree with that. Oh, that's kind of interesting. I never thought about that. Well, I guess the free market can handle that. Oh, okay. Well, I guess the free market could handle that too. I don't know about this. Okay, well, that makes sense. Well, I guess the government still needs to do roads and courts, right? Oh, there's chapters on that too, you fucker. And then by the end of the book, I was like, okay, yeah, state sucks. And then I kind of got more interested in Rothbard, and that kind of led to a bunch of other kind of Austrian thinkers. And eventually I read Human Action, and I was like, this makes a whole lot of sense. It doesn't make a lot of sense to test things against empiricism at all, because there's a lot of flaws in gathering your ideas from empiricism. And there are some flaws. There's definitely some flaws. And I was like, this doesn't make a whole lot of sense for people to gather their ideas this way. But I think Mises was right. I think Mises was definitely right. You have to start from first principles and build off of that. And I was very, very interested in that. I read right afterwards Man, Economy, and State, and it was like, this is the greatest shit ever. Like I was hooked on it, hooked. And then I started becoming dissuaded by some of the kind of things that were happening, and mostly because I read an article. I first read an article called "Why I'm Not an Austrian," I think that was called, and I'll post a link. Kaplan, by Brian Kaplan, and he basically talks about some of his criticisms with Austrianism. And when I first read this, I was like, "This is trash." And then, like, I remember saying it to someone, and they were like, I don't even remember who it was. Oh my goodness. And they were like, and then, they kind of pushed back a little bit, and I was like, maybe I should give this another read and just to see what it's all about. And I became pretty much persuaded by this. I read Walter Block's response, and then Kaplan's response to that as well. And so I saw the whole exchange with it, and I really kind of ended up being like hashtag Brian Kaplan. And that eventually kind of led me to a book that my boss, a libertarian, was recommending me, The Machinery of Freedom. And I was like, I've kind of already read like Introduction to Libertarianism books. I'm not interested in reading another one. And it kind of led me to kind of be like interested in that kind of field. Because David Friedman is a much different thinker, and I didn't know that at the time. I thought he was just another Austrian. I figured like all libertarians were Austrians, so I was wrong. Or all anarchists were Austrians. All Chicagos were mini-statists, and that's not true. There's a lot of crossover on both sides. Most Austrians are actually mini-statists. Most Chicagos are mini-statists too. There's actually some fairly conservative types, quote unquote smaller government, but they're really not, that are Chicago school people. But there are some ANCAPs in there as well. Probably far less so than Austrians. But anyway, but I was much more interested in the idea that, yeah, you can't, and kind of Friedman's kind of perspective was, look, you can't go out and try to gather, kind of have like a theory on policy based on ideas that you're getting from empiricism. And Mises was right in that respect. Because if you're saying, because there's no way that you can take data, economic data, and say, well, this thing happens when we do this and this thing happens when we do that, because every single point in time there's different trends that are happening. There's other policies that are affecting that, affecting what outcomes should be coming from other policies, and all the millions and billions of different variables make it nearly impossible for you to come up with a cogent kind of explanation of things. At the same time, I think he was also correct in critiquing Mises by kind of being pure a priori reasoning. Taking a pure a priori reasoning approach and saying, well, yeah, sure, you can work off first principles and everything, but at the same time, you can have things that are logically consistent that just don't work in reality. Completely just do not work in reality. And a good example of this is mathematics and Euclidean geometry. Euclidean geometry, again, math is one of those things that it follows first principles. It follows a logical deduction, but at the same time, you can test it against the real world, but that doesn't matter because it's all about what the logic is, and it just does play out in real world. Unfortunately, Euclidean geometry, while that applies in every respect on everything that we understand, walking around, there are definitely parts of this universe that break Euclidean geometry's philosophy, ideas all the way down. It just doesn't apply. And it's always good to say, okay, we have this internally consistent kind of understanding of the way economics works. So let's say now we can say okay, so we understand this principle. So if the government enacts some sort of policy, we can expect something to happen. And then you can look at the data when they do that and say okay, so we have some kind of real world backing to it. But again, you should not put a lot of emphasis on that empirical evidence. But at the same time, you shouldn't automatically put the pure reason approach. You can't put the pure reason kind of approach as well, because you can run into some flaws. For example, there are lots of ideologies. In fact, libertarianism is a lot of libertarians believe this, and I talked about this in a Patreon episode yesterday. The libertarians believe that they have that they are the only ideology that has any sort of logical consistency that comes from first principles. No, there are lots of them, and it's not even ideologies. There's just different types of philosophical thought, different types of ethical thought. There's different types of and on top of that, there's ideological thought, religious thought. That all there's different things that people take for advantage that follow from first principles and build upon top of those that are internally consistent, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That when you put them into practice in the real world, fucking suck, and they don't work every single time. And I would even argue that, in fact, a lot of communist thought, at least modern communist thought, I think Marx definitely had some inconsistencies, but there's a lot of modern Marxist thought that comes from their first principles, builds upon it, internally consistent in everything, and we all know how that worked out every single time. So it's important to say, okay, so we have this thing that came from first principles, and we built upon them through logic to find out what the truth is. Now let's see if this applies in real world to stand, because we can pretend to have this perfect theoretical system, but if we put it in place and it doesn't work, it doesn't matter. It really does not matter if our logic was perfect. It didn't work. Especially with something as complex as the quote unquote dismal sciences, such as economics. And oops, I'm locked out of my list now. So that's kind of why I'm much more into the Chicago school and maybe some of the neoclassical asterisk kind of thoughts, but for the most part, I kind of reject. I reject I reject the Austrian notion that that any type of empirical checks on these ideas should just be disregarded as just, oh, that's just economic history. No, I think it's important to bring into the conversation to talk about whether or not these ideas are even worth it. All right, so oh boy, this one's a tough one to choose. Let's talk about progressive rock. Libertarians love them some dad rock. I will not go so far as to say I do not. I very much do like some. In fact, I got a Pink Floyd flag hanging over my head. Like, my mother, for a birthday gift, she does quilts, quilted me a fucking quilt. And it took her you would think that it's easy to do, but apparently it was actually a great feat for her to make a quilt with the Dark Side of the Moon album cover as a quilt. I have lots. I have Rush. I have Pink Floyd. I have all kinds of different progressive rock albums in my collection, in my vinyl collection. I collect vinyl, in case you haven't figured that part out yet. I love progressive rock. I think I find it very influential, and I especially love derivatives and precursors as well. So stuff like psychedelic rock, I'm a big fan of. I also like progressive metal and math rock and all that sort of stuff. I'm very much for that. But people put this stuff on their people try to act like this. If you listen to Rush, that you have found the golden, that you have found the holy grail that no one really knows about. That it's completely top secret and only the in crowd knows about it. And once you figure it out, man, you're in, man. You're in the secret club that no one knows about. I hate to fucking break it to you, but that is not fucking true. In fact, I'm going to link an article to a blog post that I did, and I really need to start writing blogs again. But I did a blog post on my birthday. It was actually my birthday. I wrote a blog post for my birthday, and it was entitled "Libertarians, No One Gives a Fuck About Your Goddamn Dad Rock." And the premise of this article is, look, I can appreciate progressive rock. I can. But you're making it way the fuck overrated. And I can't listen to it anymore. It's getting to the point where I'm so burnt out on it because people are constantly wanting to play it all the time. And it's not just libertarians. This is not any kind of secret that's being held back by the mainstream. Very much not so. This stuff is in major motion pictures. I saw Thor Ragnarok, right? And they played like the Immigrant Song like 3 times in that movie or something. It's not anything. It's not some sort of secret sauce, okay? We've all heard Rush like 1 billion times. It's played on the fucking radio. It's in movies. It's on TV. It's in advertisements for things. Can we please stop? It's on radio shows. Radio talk show hosts use it as bumper music, okay? Pink Floyd is no fucking big secret. Like, my grandmother had a copy of Dark Side of the Moon, and she was like, I have no use for CDs anymore. Do you want this? My fucking grandmother. And she was like 84 at the time or something. Can we please stop pretending like this is like some sort of like secret knowledge? Okay? It's not that fucking amazing, and you're playing it the fuck out. There's lots of great music out there, and you're just limiting yourself to something that you think is so like hipster. It's like being hipster about Britney Spears 20 years late. I don't understand why people like. And AC/DC, come on, can we please admit they're fun, but they're completely overrated? And George Thorogood only sounds good after your 8th glass of beer at a bar? Can we please just stop with this false narrative that progressive rock is like, God tier music? It's not. All right, I'll admit that Tool is. But outside of that, and the Mars Volta, but outside of that, it's getting played the fuck out. It really fucking is getting played the fuck out. Please. And so libertarians, man, they won't stop. They won't shut the fuck up about Rush. They just won't shut the fuck up about Rush. And Jethro Tull. Oh my God. Anyways, so that's definitely very contentious. It's only going downhill from here, folks. It's only going downhill from here. Let's see. I've already talked about the NAP and deontological ethics. And I'm going to briefly touch on what my problem is before I get into the biggest point of contention I think that most libertarians have. And yes, there is something far worse than the NAP and deontological ethics. So deontological ethics, for those of you who don't know, there's basically not really. This is kind of a false dichotomy, but it kind of gives you an idea of what the kind of schools kind of base one or the other on. It's kind of like the blank slate, or it's kind of like, tabula rasa, or whatever. It's not really one or the other. There's usually some on the other, but for the most part, a lot of them really falls directly on two polar ends. So there's deontological ethics and there's consequentialist ethics. Deontological ethics is more about rules. Like, you don't break this rule, you don't break this rule, you don't do this, and you don't do that. And it does not matter at all if you can go back in time and kill baby Hitler. You still went back and killed baby Hitler, and you shouldn't kill people because that violated the non-aggression principle. And the non-aggression principle is a deontological ethic. Hold on. We'll get into that in just a second, okay? But when we're talking about ethics as an ethical axiom, when people use the NAP as an ethical axiom, all right, it would fall on the deontological kind of position as well, as would universally preferable behavior, which I'm not even going to bother wasting my time on because no one believes that shit anymore. Not even Molyneux fans believe that shit anymore. I don't even think Molyneux really believes it anymore. I just think he does every once in a while to try to sell a book. But yeah, it's basically like, these are rules and you should follow these rules regardless of the outcome, because the outcome does not matter. What matters with deontological ethics is following a set of rules. And sure, in theory, that it would create better results, but they're not concerned with that. Like I said, it doesn't matter if you hold up a liquor store. If it turns out, the liquor store, is bad or whatever, and they don't deserve the money that they were doing, or they were stealing it from other people or whatever. And in the end, it was a net benefit for everybody. It doesn't matter. You still shouldn't have done that. Like another one would be the categorical imperative, Kant. And one of the criticisms that Kant was facing at the time was, like, what if someone comes to your door and, your family is up in the attic hiding, and someone knocks on the door and says, like, where's your family? I'm going to go kill them. He had, in the categorical imperative, like, he was really insistent that people not lie. It's always wrong to lie no matter what. And it would be wrong for you to lie to this criminal, even if he's going to use that knowledge to hurt people or to hurt yourself, etc. That it's always wrong. Now, the consequentialist side, as you can imagine, is not really worried about rules. It's more worried about outcomes. So they'll say, so if they do end up having a rule, it would be here's why you don't want to do this, because of this outcome. However, if this outcome, for a fact that this outcome is not going to happen, then by all means, because they're much more interested in the outcome of the effects. So they would say, like, you don't want to do anything that would result in someone's untimely death, especially if you're not being harmed by this person, right? Because that would have a negative impact or whatever. But they're not really concerned about the rules. right? So you could, I mean, if you can go back in time and kill baby Hitler, I mean, at the time Hitler didn't do nothing wrong, but you could prevent the deaths of 12 million people. Now I understand that, yeah, there's probably, you're gonna trigger like a butterfly or chaos effect, and something even worse could happen right down the line. But that's kind of the point that I'm making. So the NAP follows that when people used it as an ethical axiom, which I have a problem with. So as you can see, like, I'm not really too concerned. If people want, here's a good example, and this is the most commonly used one, is that if I'm in the forest and if I get stranded in the forest and I get lost in the forest or whatever, and I'm just hiking around, just trying to find somewhere like Blair Witch Project or something, and I just happen to stumble across a vacation cabin out in the middle of the woods, and I can look inside the window and see food in there and a telephone, I'm going to kick in that door and eat the food and call someone for help right away. I would. And I would not care about their private property rights at all until after the fact. And then, of course, I'm going to feel bad about doing that, and I'm going to probably come back and, pay for their broken door and their missing food. And, some a little bit more for them feeling violated for me entering their property. Because at the end of the day, like, I would have starved, and I have a pretty good feeling that they probably would not mind if I had done that, given my circumstances. But if you were to always take a strict non-aggression approach completely, you would say that it was wrong for you to do that, period. And you shouldn't do that. Then it doesn't matter if you're going to die. It just doesn't matter. And that's why I have problems with it as an ethical axiom. Now, as a principle, as just kind of like a principle, like this is the kind of rule that you ought to follow in order to be kind of like a libertarian. It's not like a complete ethical axiom. And there are people who would say that the NAP is the only ethical axiom ever, which is wrong, because you can still say that, maybe you shouldn't, be a dick maybe you shouldn't, just make crude comments to your coworkers, right? That would be something I think a lot of people would agree with, but that doesn't violate the non-aggression principle. And you can also make claims like, look, it's probably not a good idea to go into a biker bar and call the nearest biker a faggot. That'd be probably one of the dumbest things that you can do, and nobody in this entire world would give a goddamn, including NAP advocates. None of them would give a goddamn whatsoever if you got your ass kicked for doing that. They'd be like, brother, you're fucking stupid. You just don't do it. So yeah, like, there's that. But as terms of like a one sentence philosophy, kind of a one sentence libertarian philosophy, I also don't agree with, not even from an ethical standpoint. Because if you're going to set law based on this non-aggression approach, you're going to be running into some problems as well. And Friedman talks about this in this chapter. I think it's chapter 4 in the section called Problems in The Machinery to Freedom. I highly suggest that you read this thing, because I'm going to be parroting a lot from what he's talking about. So if you were to say ethically, and I've talked to people about this a million times, and I haven't found a single person who disagreed with this this particular point. I think how it applies to other points is when people start getting off the train. So that is when you have a revolver. All right, let's say that you had a revolver and you put 6 bullets in the chamber, and you spin the chamber and pull the trigger against someone's head, and of course it's going to fire because it's got a 6. It's got a 1 out of 1 chance it's going to fire. Right? It's highly unlikely that it's going to fire. So pretty much 1-to-1 chance that's going to fire. You would say like, oh yeah, that's definitely bad. Well, what if I took out half of the bullets, spin the chamber, and fired it? Well, like, no, that's still bad because you're still putting them at risk, right? Well, what if we put just 1 bullet in the chamber? Still a problem. Well, what if we had a revolver that could take like 100 rounds, and I put 1 bullet in the chamber? How about 1 billion rounds? How about 1 trillion rounds? So on and so on and so on and so on. You could say that, okay, that's not good, because you're still putting people at risk. And we would say that when you're putting people at risk, voluntarily putting people at risk, that they didn't ask for, you're putting them at risk, and even if it's a 1 out of a billion chance, it still would be a violation of the non-aggression principle. Well, how does that not also apply to driving an automobile? And I understand there's a difference between a gun, which is devised to shoot and fire a bullet and kill something, or at least inflict a mass casualty on something, versus a car. But if we're talking about putting people at risk, whether that risk is from an object that is meant to transport or kill, it doesn't really matter if we're still putting people at risk, and especially at a much higher risk than a revolver with 1 billion rounds and only 1 bullet in the chamber. So you can kind of see like where I'm kind of going with this. It would be unethical for you to drive your car in a completely libertarian society where it's completely like, no, we need to follow the NAP to the rule. Everything that violates the non-aggression principle is, because you can make the case that driving a car puts all kinds of pedestrians and other motorists on the road at a very high risk of getting hit. And in fact, in Vegas, it's a big thing out here, where pedestrians are constantly getting hit at crosswalks, constantly, and they keep spending like all kinds of government money on like these big, expensive crosswalks where it's got the big flashing lights, and it's got at the center of the road they have to start walking towards the other side of the traffic, so that way they can see if oncoming cars are coming, and then press a button again, and that causes all kinds of blinking lights. And still people are getting hit at these things. Still people are getting hit by these things all of the time. And if you're going to be putting people at risk driving your car, that should be a violation of the non-aggression principle, and you ought not do it. It should be illegal to do it. I think that's completely that you can make a legal framework. If that's going to be the laws, don't aggress. You're going to get yourself into a lot of kind of legal trouble with that. Sorry, nicotine break again. So the other problem is that if we're going to have this rule that's or this law that cannot be broken, even if the consequences don't matter, which that's what it would be. It would not matter through the consequences. It only matters that you're violating someone's property rights. Period. So take the death ray argument. So what is a death ray exactly? It's a device that fires large amounts of protons at a particular thing, like a certain high frequency and high intensity of light that will burn things or kill people, right? Now, if I were to be sitting in my private property and fire these photons at your house and set your house on fire, you could say that that's a violation of your property. And it's not because there was damage caused by your property. It's because I, without your consent, trespassed photons into your property at your house. Period. And that would say that it would be the same if I had a death ray and I only turned it on 10%, so it just kind of lightly scathed your house, or maybe caused like an influx of radiation that may later cause what's the term, like radiation sickness or whatever kind of thing that maybe turn you into the Hulk from the gamma rays. I don't know. You could say that would be a violation. Okay. Well, what if I had a really bright spotlight, like the kind of spotlight that you would signal Batman from, right? And I shine that in your window, and no matter what kind of, day blinders that you put on there, you would say like, well, that's violating my property because you're still you're trespassing those photons. Well, what if it's just a flashlight? Or what if it's just ambient light that's coming out of my house that's visible onto your property? It's still trespassing those photons onto your property. If I can't go outside and smoke a cigarette because some of that pollution may go onto your property. Now, sure, there wouldn't be much of a there wouldn't be much of a lawsuit that would come from that. I mean, you could sue someone for doing that in this society where they have a legal issue with violations of property rights, right? right? And you were to try to take them to court and say, like, you know, he damaged me because I could see a candle from his window, and those were sending photons over to my house that I did not consent to. The judge would be like, all right, well, I'm not going to award you any damages because it didn't cause you any damage, you know, and your emotional damage I could give a shit about, you know, you fucking snowflake. But at the same time, he's still breaking the law. He's still violating the property rights of someone else. And that now you're going to end up having to do like these convoluted legal contracts every time you buy property with all of your neighbors, or with the person who is responsible for the deed restricted areas, to say, okay, so you can smoke on your property, but you can't, you can smoke cigarettes on your property, you can smoke marijuana on your property, you can smoke heroin on your property, you can't burn a tire because that produces way too much soot and will cause property damage. You can have a candle visible from your, and it would, all the things that would have to be stipulated in a legal contract would be nearly impossible for anyone to find. I mean, if you see some of the contracts that people sign today, you know, with all the fine print and all the bullshit that no one reads, like even the basic EULA, no one fucking reads. What do you think the EULA is going to look like when every single thing is going to be taken into account in terms of the non-aggression principle that are minor infractions at best, or at worst, I guess, all the way down to completely benign violations of the non-aggression principle that need to be stipulated in contract to say that it's okay for you to do or that it's not okay for you to do. There's no way you could possibly keep a hold of all this stuff. I think the non-aggression principle is a great rule of thumb, but it should also be kind of taken with a grain of salt when it comes to things that don't have negative outcomes. And again, this is where I come back into consequentialism and say, I think the consequentialist approach to libertarianism is a far more rational kind of thing, because, you know, who really gives a shit if everything is pure? Like, I don't really care if I live in a very pure libertarian society at the end of the day, so much so that if the outcome of my living is going to be better if I have, you know, something that maybe not completely pure libertarianism. Sure, maybe no state, definitely no state. I don't think a state is even possible for human freedom and possible to exist with human freedom at the same time. It's just not going to happen. But, you know, if I lived in a specific area that maybe had some sort of like community safety social net that we are all kind of required to pay, maybe if that were the case, if that was to be like a more preferable society for everybody to live in, then that would be the society that I live in. I don't know if that's the case because that's an experiment we haven't tried yet. However, I don't think it will. But if I knew that it would, I would not care about my quote unquote mob principles. I would not care at the end of the day. I'm much more interested in the well-being of others and the outcomes of these situations more than anything else. And it's pretty much where I stand on the NAP. I think I may have actually elaborated more in this episode, which wasn't what I was trying to do. Like I've elaborated on it before, but I think this is okay. All right, so we got that done, and we only have one more thing left, and this is where people are going to unsubscribe to me. This is where people are going to unsubscribe to me. And I'm genuinely scared, and you know, like I know I've been muting these out, but I'm sorry, I have to do it because I need to calm my nerves, and I need to get some nicotine in me to calm my nerves a little bit. Because this is a fucking hot take, guys. Some fucking serious hot take action right here. I don't even want to put this in the description of this, but pineapple on pizza ain't that bad, guys. It's really not that bad. I think you guys are way overblowing how bad pineapple is. There are far worse toppings that people put on their pizza. In fact, I was even talking to someone today about how they went to looking up a pizza place and they had fucking almonds on there. If people want to put pineapple on their pizzas and you don't like it, then just don't fucking eat it. Pineapple is fucking amazing, okay? Maybe not on pizzas, but it's fucking amazing. Have you ever just sat down and just worked on fucking pineapple. Not pineapple out of a can. I'm talking about fresh pineapple where you just cut it open and eat it. It's fucking amazing. And if you go to Hawaii, it's fucking exponentially better. It's so fucking amazing. I fucking love pineapple. Now, I am not the kind of person who gets pineapple pizza. I do not order pineapple pizza, with one exception, and I'll talk about that in a second. I will not order it. If it's there, if I'm at work and they have like a big pizza party and they have different types of pizza, and they have pineapple and they have a supreme over here and they have this over there and this over there, and then there just happens to be a ham and pineapple, that would be the one that I would least go to. But there's one more I think that I would least go to, is anything with fucking olives in it. Olives are my pineapple. Black olives are my pineapple. Green olives, I've had green olives on pizza and that was surprisingly good. But black olives, I do enjoy black olives a little bit. The canned kind. When you get into like the more Mediterranean black olives, and those are fucking amazing. You can put those on a pizza. I'd probably be okay with that. But just regular black olives are fucking foul on pizza. It just does not work. It's a culinary clash that just does not deserve to exist on this planet. But that's okay, and pineapple isn't? No. I disagree. I disagree full-heartedly. Leave pineapple pizza people alone. Just ignore them. They're fine. I will make one exception. There has been one pineapple pizza that I have been like hooked on, and it's a particular kind, and I don't really think that it completely qualifies as as a pizza snob probably would start to argue like maybe this is not technically pizza, and that is the Maui Zowie from Round Table, and that's because they don't use pizza sauce. They use like this certain kind of like citrusy fruity sauce in it, and there's like all kinds of other stuff on there like bacon and sausage and onions, both kinds. Green onions and red onions, and a little bit of pineapple, but for the most part of that Polynesian sauce, I don't know what it is. It doesn't taste fruity. That's not the right term for it, but it's definitely like there's some definite citrus and pineapple in the sauce itself. So it is just a fucking masterpiece. I even tell people like, if you hate pineapple pizza, you actually may really like this, but it is very much an exception to the rule and not the rule itself. I would never order a ham and pepperoni, ham and pineapple pizza. Ham and pepperoni maybe, but ham and pineapple pizza I would never order. Maybe if I was like really drunk, maybe, and I just regret it. But I just don't get the hate for pineapple. It's not that fucking bad. I don't know what everybody's problem is. And this one seems to get the more hate than anchovies, which I would say should be more contentious, shouldn't it? Because it's just fishy salt. Like the flavor is very fishy and very salty. Two flavors that some people just don't really dig on. I, however, find it fucking amazing. In fact, I would argue that the best pizza combination by far, if you can find a place that can do both, fucking tell me where this is so that if I ever visit, I know where to go. But it's definitely salami and anchovy. It's by far the best pizza ever. And every time I order it, usually the guy at the pizza place goes like, "That is the most interesting combination of toppings ever. I absolutely have to try it." And the next time I go there, they would go like, "That was fucking amazing. Why aren't more people ordering this combination?" I'm serious. Like it's so bizarre that no one's ever thought of putting those two together, and when they do, it's a whirlwind of emotions for the positive. If you don't like anchovies on your pizza, you are wrong. If you are going to hate on people who put pineapple on their pizza, and then you're one of those people who hate on people who put pineapple on their pizza, but not anchovies, I don't get it. This has to be purely like a bullshit meme. I don't buy for a second that you believe this nonsense at all. I think secretly that when someone does order a ham and pepperoni pineapple pizza, that you want to eat it. You want to eat it, but you just don't want to deal with the stigma of being the guy who eats pineapple on their pizza. You're basically a pizza cuck. Is what it is at the end of the day. And I know, I think this is what's going to get me the most amount of hate mail out of everything. I mean, I went after the non-aggression principle, but pineapple on pizza? How fucking dare you, Jim? How fucking dare you? No, fuck you. Let people have their pineapple, right? Let people have their pineapple and keep your fucking black olives out of the Supreme. Just keep it out. Nobody wants that garbage anyway, right? It's a fucking joke. Now, I think the big debate is, do I want to go through some of the Amazon purchases? I think I do. I need to pause it for a second to kind of get an idea of when I last did one of these things so I can set the date right. So I'm going to take a hit of my vape and of my mouth fedora, and then I'm going to go into some of the things people bought on Amazon during the last period. I don't think we've done it. We haven't done it since Jeremy was on, not this last time, but the time before. So, we've got a while. We've got a few episodes where we skipped over. So, and some of these I'm going to fly right through because I think a lot of them were combination orders and I think were pretty interesting. So, you don't have to sit tight because it's going to be instant as soon as I hit stop. So, I'll be right back. All right. So, let's get into this. So there's a lot of interesting things. So we have 4 foot. What is it? 4 foot, 45 watt extendable utility LED shop light workbench. Blah 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 blah. It's basically like those neon lights that you see, except you can kind of fix them up yourself, but they're LEDs. Pretty neat. A wireless access point. Ubiquity, Unify, Light. I don't know, man. These things are weird. Someone bought Crush It, and how? I think I know who bought this though. Crushing It. How great entrepreneurs build their businesses and influence, and how you can too. By the way, I own this book. I'm like halfway through it. I just haven't had a lot of time to dig down and read this thing, but it's a fucking fantastic book. It's written by Gary Vaynerchuk, who is, people kind of wrongly kind of put him in as a motivational speaker. He does kind of motivationally-ish stuff, but a lot of his content is trying to motivate you into starting, doing what you want to do in terms of your business and giving you really good advice on how to execute on that and telling you a lot of the pitfalls people fall into when it comes to marketing and promoting your goods and services. Very valuable book. I really enjoy it, and I really kind of like Gary V's style because he cusses. He doesn't give a fuck, and he'll straight up tell you like, yeah, you're a fucking loser. You're doing it fucking wrong, and here's why. So he's not like a Tony Robbins, and someone ended up when I posted like a picture of this book, like, oh, look what just came in my Amazon locker. People are like, oh no, it's come to this. Like, you really must be down on your luck. It's like, no, it's not a motivational thing. It's really kind of like business, biz dev and business strategies for B2C and B2B companies, and how they can use social media for like free advertising and stuff. It's kind of an interesting read. Highly, highly recommend it. The Best of Mad Libs. I believe this is an audio book. The Thrust of the Vile. I have no idea what that is. I know what Mad Libs are. Oh, okay. So this is an album. I don't know what this is. The Waltons, Thrust of the Vile. Someone bought it on CD. Interesting. People are buying CDs. I have a feeling that might be some kind of tech journalist who may have been using my link. Let's see. Visine All Day Comfort. 0.5 fluid ounces. So someone had to buy some Visine. I wonder why, man. Polarized handy outlet plug. What the heck is this? Looks like something for a light socket, or no? Oh, I see. You screw it into a light socket, and it gives you like a so you can plug in like a regular plug into a light socket. That's kind of neat. Shoe Goo, repair adhesive for fixing worn shoes. I used to use this all the time when I used to skate. But then, yeah. So someone is really into chess because they bought a chess clock and game timer. I think I know who bought that as well. X-Rocker 4.1 Pro Series pedestal wireless game chair. And oh boy, is that quite a chair? That looks pretty. It looks like a car seat for your house. It looks super comfortable. If I had $200 to drop on a chair, I'd drop it. So someone bought like a 100-foot Ethernet cable from Media Bridge. Johnny B Mode styling gel seems to be coming up a lot lately. People are buying pomades and hair gels and stuff. I think they're just doing it because they know that I'm bald, and so they're trying to rub it in. Pun intended. IoGear Bluetooth USB micro adapter. And this, okay, it's just a little adapter for Bluetooth. A scrubbing broom head with natural stiff wrestling fibers. Okay. Someone needs to do some sweeping. A professional quality nickel-plated 3.5 millimeter male to female stereo audio cable extension cable. I think I probably need one of those for doing audio commentary for movies again. Okay, so this is part of a bunch of things. So I'm going to kind of select it carefully. So is this safety pins? Okay, that's not it. So someone bought safety pins, but that's not related. So someone bought a 3 volt 1 amp AC power adapter to, wait, no, that's not it. So someone, it's just some sort of AC adapter with a 5.5/2.1 millimeter plug. That's not what I thought it was. My bad. Carrying on. Go do it for people who always wanted to start a business. Well, this looks interesting. I guess someone read the Gary Vee book and wanted more. It's an audio book. Jeremy Harbour, Chris Dwyer, and Audible Studios publisher. Okay, I'll maybe have to check that one out. And again, someone's still into chess. I bet it's the same order. Premium tournament chess set combo with natural pieces, navy blue. I wonder if that's good. I've been meaning to get. No, this looks like a portable thing. I want to get like a nice chess set just to have. It's really been a while since I've delved into that. 20 pieces dip PC mount, 5 pins, 3.5 millimeter socket headphone, and stereo audio. I think is someone trying to hack their phone to hack their iPhone to try to get it to be a 3.5 headphone jack again. If you figure out how to do this, let me know, because I know some people who might be interested in doing that. All right, so what is this one? Someone bought some iPhone. These are like the old iPhone, iPod jacks to USB, and they bought a 2-pack of a 3-foot 2-pack. So I have another page. Holy crap! People went crazy. Stiff bristle cordless drill powered spinning scrubbing brush. An output cord. I don't know what this is. Okay, so it's an audio cord. UXL SET 013 blah 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 M1M 3.5 output cord split core current transformer 60 amp 1 volt. I don't know what this is, but it looks like it goes into an audio jack into a big blue plastic thing. Someone bought a Brush O-Cedar professional heavy-duty deck scrubber, and it's only got it's got 2.5 stars. So that might be a return later. We'll see. Apple iPod dock 30-pin connector to USB cable. So someone bought yet another USB cable to iPod adapter. All right, so then we have some BBs, zinc-plated BBs. I think it's for a BB gun or an airsoft gun. Someone's going to do some damage. Maybe got some rodents. Then we have a network router. Looks like about, I guess. Ubiquiti Networks network router. Okay, this one's great. I already saw this one earlier. So this is a Under Armour's Men Copter t-shirt. And it's a yellow t-shirt with a gray helicopter on it. And I don't know what that means. Moving along. Then we have a chess games scorebook for 50 games, 100 moves and diagrams. Someone really likes chess. The best chess set ever. This is what it says. The best chess set ever. Because I guess it comes with the best strategy guide ever. It doesn't look that great, but I bet it's probably a far more functional for someone who's probably learning how to play or something. All right, so this is a combination of things. And then there's a few other things, and we'll wrap up, but I think this one's really interesting. So this is a... by all means, try to guess what this person is trying to build, okay? So they bought a... I'm going to make sure I get all of this stuff going. Okay, so they bought a 5-volt, 2.5, 3 amp power supply adapter micro USB charger. Then they bought a Raspberry Pi 3 Model B motherboard. And then they bought a case, which looks like a Nintendo. An NES case functional power and reset button. That looks awesome, and it's $20. I probably might get one of those. Yeah, someone's building a RetroPie system. By the way, I have one. I have two, actually. I have one that I have for virtually every console system ever, except for Intellivision. And then I have one that's just for Intellivision, which I have the actual, not actual, but reproduction Intellivision controllers hooked up just for Intellivision only. So that's kind of neat. Yeah, so have a whole lot of fun with that. Someone bought a 30-ounce double-wall stainless steel vacuum-sealed travel mug. It's looks kind of neat. It's got a metal straw. I guess this is part of it too. Oh, someone bought a Raspberry Pi brushless cooling fan for their Raspberry Pi. I don't know if you're going to need that. And, maybe if you're going to try to overclock it and try to get it to play Crysis. I don't understand why you need that to play Nintendo games. So I've noticed that unless you have a really good power supply, unless you're doing the high, the 5-volt supplies, if you're using a lower wattage supply for the Raspberry Pi, it lags hard on Super Nintendo. So, yeah, okay. Then we have... Oh, someone bought more chess stuff. A wholesale chess, advanced digital chess, and game timer with bonus delay. I already said that one. Let's see. Kunsway lighting cord. I think that's for... Kunsway lighting T5TA LED 2 power cords, 4-foot cable, 3 chips wire connector with US plug, 4-foot. So I think that's for the lights that they're going to be hanging up. And last but probably least, a JK Safety 9 pockets Class 2 high visibility zipper front safety vest with reflective strips, HQ, breathable mesh. It's basically like a crosswalk uniform, but instead of getting the yellow that they normally wear, this one's gray. Because life is gray. So anyways, I hope this was very much informative. Not very... Geez, I spent almost another 20 minutes just on the Amazon purchases alone, so someone's probably thinking... I don't know. Whatever. I had a whole lot of fun doing this episode. I was actually kind of fearing it for a while, but I was like, you know what? I'm just going to crack down and do it. And if I don't like it, I can just record it. And this was basically take 2. The first take was just basically me trying to get through the intro and fucking up the joke and then starting over. But it worked pretty good. Paused it a few times for some nick breaks, but for sure. This is a whole lot of fun. So if you do disagree with me, by all means, let me know. I'm definitely interested in having a conversation because, like I said, I'm much more interested in the ideas that I'm talking about here. I'm not trying to be a contrarian, and I'm not trying to be mean, and I'm very much open to be proven wrong, which is why I ended up on these positions in the first place, because I ended up chances are I probably ended up agreeing with you, depending on what topic we were talking about. and what side of the debate you were on. I probably agreed with you at one particular point, but it was because I went out and tried to look for criticisms of it and found valuable pieces of criticism that I started kind of reeling back from some of those positions and finding positions I thought were more intellectually sound or logically sound or empirically sound. So I definitely would be interested in having conversations with people who disagree with me. Let me know. You know how to get a hold of me. There's plenty of different ways. The least of which is Facebook, which seriously, fuck Facebook. Fuck Facebook. I'm so over Facebook. But I'm still on there just to kind of promote stuff, but that's pretty much it. So anyways, thanks for listening. And trying to think, there's maybe some things that like I said, I have aprons that Steve Miller sent me. I'm still thinking of a contest, so be prepared. I'm going to be announcing a contest so you can get your own non-aggress the cook apron. And we have the new logo t-shirt in the Teespring store. That'd be store.lolberts.com. Open Bazaar is back in business, but only with Bitcoin Cash only. Yes, I understand Bitcoin Cash sucks. I agree, but I know you're not going to pay the Bitcoin transaction, regular Bitcoin transaction fees. Anything else? Nope. Anyways, I'll wrap this up. So thank you, Jim, for coming on. Oh, I didn't mind. It was a whole lot of fun. Thanks for having me. Anyways, I'll talk to you guys later. Hail Satan.